we are going to learn how to use the marking gauge and Mortise gauge. The objectives of this video are: after the session you'll be able to demonstrate the use of marking gauge and Mortise gauge. Let's start. Perform the marking gauge and their application. The marking gauge is used to make an accurate mark parallel to the planed edge or side of a piece of wood for the purpose of obtaining the width, thickness or depth of a groove. The marking gauge consists of spur, thumb screw, stock, beam. To use a marking gauge, hold the gauge in the left hand keeping the spur up. Hold the foot rule in the right hand and set the required distance between stock and spur. Keep the graduation of foot rule in front. Adjust the stock with the help of your left hand thumb and index finger. Now the marking gauge is set. Tighten the thumb screw. Check the measurement of accuracy. Hold the gauge stock in the right hand thumb on the top behind the spur, the forefinger on the stock and the 3 other fingers on the stem of the tool. Place one end of the piece against the bench stop and the other end in left plan. Place gauge stock in contact with the face edge of the piece and spur, touching the piece slightly in slanting position. Give forward strokes on the stock near the end. Hold the piece in your left hand and complete the gauge mark. Check the gauge mark with the foot rule. Precautions: do not use a long spur for gauging. Do not see the distance by keeping the rule flat. Do not press the spur while gauging. Do not try to make a deep gauge. Keep the stock face rubbing against the straight edge. Do not put the spur at right angles with the face. Task 2. Perform the Mortise gauge and their application. Hold the Mortise gauge in your left hand and keeping the spur up. Hold the steel rule in the right hand and set the required distance between stock 2 spurs can be spaced at different distances and mark 2 parallel lines at a time. Keep the direction of the steel rule in front. Adjust the stock with the help of the left hand thumb and index finger. Now the Mortise gauge is set. Tighten the thumb screw to fix it in place. Hold the Mortise gauge stock with your right hand thumb on top. Place one end of the piece against the bench stop and the other end in the left palm. Place gauge stock in contact with the face edge of the piece and spur, touching the piece lightly in slanting position. Give forward strokes on the stock near the end. Hold the piece in your left hand and complete the gauge marking parallel lines of tenons. Similarly, process the marked tenon line as per drawing. Check the gauge mark with steel rule. Recap. In this session, we looked at the usage of marking and Mortise gauges in woodworking. The marking gauge, comprising a spur, thumb screw, stock, and beam, is demonstrated for making accurate parallel marks on wood surfaces. Then we learned proper gauge setup, holding techniques, and precautionary measures to ensure accuracy. The Mortise gauge is introduced for marking parallel lines on tenons with emphasis on gauge setup, correct holding and subsequent checks using the steel rule. Hope you understood everything taught in this session. See you in another video. Thank you and goodbye until then.